The warm Arizona wind carried the scent of gunpowder as Brock Valentine's boots crunched against the sun-baked earth. His keen eyes scanning the horizon for movement among the desert scrub, when he spotted her, a woman's body sprawled beside a ransacked wagon. Her dress stained crimson with blood that looked almost black in the fading daylight. It was the spring of 1876, a time when the Arizona Territory was still wild and untamed. Brock had been tracking a herd of wild mustangs for 3 days, hoping to break a few for his growing ranch. Instead, he found himself dismounting quickly, his weathered hand reaching for the colt at his hip as he approached the scene cautiously. The wagon had been stripped clean, its canvas covering torn and fluttering in the breeze. Whoever had done this was long gone, but Brock kept his guard up as he knelt beside the woman. She couldn't have been more than 25, with hair the color of autumn wheat spread across the dirt. Her face was pale beneath a layer of trail dust, and a nasty gash marred her forehead. "Miss," Brock whispered, pressing his fingers against her neck to feel for a pulse. Relief washed over him when he felt the faint thrumming beneath her skin. She was alive, barely. He reached for his canteen, wetting his bandana to gently wipe away the blood and dirt from her face. Her skin was surprisingly soft beneath his calloused fingertips. As he cleaned her wound, her eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened to reveal eyes as blue as the summer sky. Those eyes focused on him with surprising clarity before her cracked lips parted. "Brock," she whispered hoarsely, and then consciousness slipped away from her again. Brock froze, the bandana suspended in midair. How did she know his name? He didn't recognize her, would have remembered a face like hers. Yet she'd spoken his name with such familiarity, as if she'd known him all her life. There was no time to ponder this mystery. She needed medical attention, and fast. Gathering her carefully in his arms, he was struck by how light she felt, like a bird with hollow bones. He lifted her onto his horse, mounting behind her and cradling her against his chest. "Hold on, miss," he murmured, though she couldn't hear him. "Silverton's just a few hours' ride." The journey to town seemed interminable. Every jolt of the horse's hooves made the woman moan softly in pain, though she didn't wake. Brock found himself talking to her, telling her about his ranch, the mustangs he'd been tracking, anything to fill the silence and keep his own worries at bay. Night had fallen by the time the scattered lights of Silverton came into view. Brock rode straight to Doc Wilson's place, hammering on the door until a lamp was lit inside and the doctor appeared, looking rumpled and irritated until he saw the unconscious woman. "Bring her in," the older man ordered, clearing space on his examination table. "What happened?" "Found her by a ransacked wagon about 15 miles east," Brock explained, laying her down as gently as possible. "Looks like bandits." "She's been unconscious except for one moment when she opened her eyes." Doc Wilson's hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking her wounds and vital signs. "She's dehydrated, lost blood, and that head wound concerns me, but she's young and appears strong. With proper care, she might pull through." Brock paced the small room as the doctor worked, cleaning and stitching the gash on her forehead and examining her for other injuries. He found a bullet graze along her ribs that had bled considerably but wasn't deep enough to be life-threatening. "She'll need watching tonight," Doc Wilson said finally, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Critical hours ahead. You staying, Valentine?" "I'll stay," Brock replied without hesitation. He couldn't explain why, but he felt responsible for this stranger who somehow knew his name. The doctor showed him how to help the woman sip water, how to check her fever, and what signs would indicate she was worsening rather than improving. Then he retreated to his bedroom, leaving Brock alone with the mysterious woman. In the lamplight, Brock studied her face. She was beautiful, with delicate features and full lips that were regaining their color. Who was she? And how did she know him? As dawn broke, painting the small room in hues of gold, the woman stirred. Brock, who had dozed off in a chair beside her, jerked awake as she moaned softly. Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing those startling blue eyes once more. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice rough from dryness. Brock quickly offered her water, supporting her head as she drank. "You're in Silverton at Doc Wilson's place. I found you yesterday out by Cottonwood Creek." "Your wagon had been attacked," she nodded slightly, wincing at the movement. "I remember, men on horseback. They wanted our supplies, our money. My father," her eyes widened suddenly, filling with tears. "My father tried to fight them." "I didn't see anyone else," Brock said gently. "Just you." A tear slipped down her cheek. "They shot him. He fell from the wagon. I tried to reach him, but they hit me too." Her hand went to her side where the bullet had grazed her. "I'm sorry," Brock said, feeling inadequate in the face of her grief. "I'll send someone to look for him when you're stronger, give him a proper burial." She nodded, then looked at him with those piercing eyes. "You're Brock Valentine." It wasn't a question. Brock's brow furrowed. "How do you know my name?" A ghost of a smile crossed her lips. "Everyone knows of Brock Valentine in these parts, the rancher who tames wild mustangs. My father and I were heading to your ranch when we were attacked. He had a letter of introduction from William Thornton in Denver." Understanding dawned on Brock. William Thornton was a business associate who had written months ago about a friend needing work. "You must be Samuel Atwood's daughter," he said. "Stella," she confirmed. "Stella Atwood. Your father wrote that you were both looking for a fresh start after losing your mother." "Yes," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears again. "And now I've lost him too." Impulsively, Brock took her hand. It was small and cold in his larger one. "You're not alone, Miss Atwood. I promised your father a position and I stand by that promise. When you're well, there's a place for you at Valentine Ranch." Gratitude shone in her eyes before exhaustion overtook her again. As she drifted back to sleep, Brock gently released her hand, troubled by the unfamiliar feelings stirring within him. He'd brought injured strangers to town before, had even offered jobs to those in need, but something about Stella Atwood was different. Perhaps it was the way she'd spoken his name when she first opened her eyes, as if she'd been searching for him all along. Doc Wilson pronounced Stella stable but in need of rest and recovery. "She shouldn't be moved for at least a week," he advised. "That head wound needs watching." Brock arranged for a room at the Silverton Hotel and hired the innkeeper's wife, Mrs. Holloway, to help care for Stella during the day. He sent one of the town's young men out to locate Samuel Atwood's body and bring it back for a proper burial. Each evening after tending to business at his ranch, Brock would return to town to check on Stella. She grew stronger each day, her natural resilience asserting itself. They would talk for hours about her life in Denver, her father's work as a bookkeeper, and her own dreams of someday running a business of her own. "Father thought I was being impractical," she confided one evening, sitting up in bed with her hair loose around her shoulders. "But he indulged me. Let me keep the books for his office, taught me everything he knew about business." "Sounds like he was a good man," Brock observed. "The best," Stella said softly. "He gave up everything after Mother died, sold our house, our belongings, all to give me a fresh start away from the memories." 3 days after Brock had found her, Samuel Atwood was laid to rest in Silverton's small cemetery. Stella insisted on attending despite Doc Wilson's protests. Brock stood beside her as the preacher spoke words of comfort that seemed to float away on the desert wind. When her legs began to tremble beneath her, Brock quietly offered his arm and she leaned against him, accepting his strength. After the funeral, Stella grew quiet, withdrawing into herself. Brock worried, but Mrs. Holloway assured him it was natural. "Grief has its own time," the older woman said. "Just be patient with her." A week after he'd found her, Doc Wilson declared Stella well enough to travel the 10 miles to Valentine Ranch. "Just take it slow," he cautioned, "and no strenuous activity for another week at least." Brock brought his wagon to town, padding the seat with blankets to make it as comfortable as possible for Stella. She emerged from the hotel wearing a dress borrowed from Mrs. Holloway's daughter, a simple blue calico that brought out the color of her eyes. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" Brock asked as he helped her into the wagon. "I can't impose on the good people of Silverton forever," she replied with a determined lift of her chin. And I need to work, Mr. Valentine. Idleness gives me too much time to think. Brock, he corrected gently. If we're going to be working together, you might as well use my given name. The ride to Valentine Ranch was taken slowly, with Brock pointing out landmarks and telling stories about the land he'd come to love. Stella listened attentively, asking questions that revealed her sharp intelligence and natural curiosity. Valentine Ranch sprawled across 1,000 acres of mixed grassland and forest, with a creek running through the northern section. The main house was modest but well built, with a wide porch that offered views of the mountains to the west. Several outbuildings, including a barn, stables, and bunkhouse, clustered nearby. "It's beautiful," Stella breathed as they approached. "Still a work in progress," Brock admitted. "But it's home." He helped her down from the wagon, conscious of her still healing injuries. As they walked toward the house, a tall, gray-haired woman emerged from the doorway. "Mrs. Garcia, this is Miss Stella Atwood," Brock said. "She'll be staying with us and helping with the books once she's fully recovered. Miss Atwood, this is Elena Garcia, who keeps this place and me from falling into complete chaos." Elena Garcia's stern features softened as she took in Stella's pale face. "Welcome, Miss Atwood. I've prepared the guest room for you. You must be tired after your journey." "Thank you," Stella said sincerely, "and please call me Stella." The next few weeks established a new rhythm at Valentine Ranch. Stella gradually regained her strength, first helping Elena with simple household tasks, then beginning to organize Brock's chaotic account books. Brock watched with growing admiration as she transformed his haphazard record-keeping system into something orderly and comprehensible. "You have quite a profitable operation here," she told him one evening as they sat on the porch after dinner, "but you're not leveraging your assets effectively." Brock raised an eyebrow. "Is that so? Your Mustang training operation is breaking even, but it could be doing much better. You're selling too cheaply to the Army, and you're not promoting the quality of your stock to private buyers who would pay more. Most private buyers want fancy bloodlines, not wild Mustangs," Brock pointed out. "Not necessarily. There's a growing market for reliable, sturdy mounts with the stamina these Mustangs have. You just need to reach the right customers." Her eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. "I've been drafting some ideas." Brock found himself captivated not just by her business acumen, but by the passion that animated her features when she spoke about her ideas. In the fading light, with her hair loose around her shoulders and color in her cheeks, she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. The realization hit him with unexpected force. He was falling in love with Stella Atwood. The thought both exhilarated and terrified him. Brock had been alone for so long, focused solely on building his ranch. Women had come and gone in his life, but none had ever made him feel this combination of admiration, desire, and tenderness. Summer progressed, bringing scorching days and nights cooled by gentle breezes. Stella thrived at Valentine Ranch, gradually taking over most of the business operations while Brock focused on training the Mustangs and managing the cattle that were his main source of income. They worked well together, complementing each other's strengths. Stella implemented her marketing ideas, writing letters to wealthy ranchers and businessmen throughout the territory, showcasing the quality of Valentine Ranch Mustangs. Orders began to come in, and prices rose accordingly. "You were right," Brock admitted one evening as they reviewed the monthly accounts. "We've nearly doubled the profit on the horses." Stella smiled, a hint of pride in her expression. "It's just good business sense. You did the hard part, turning wild Mustangs into valuable mounts." Their hands brushed as she passed him the ledger, and Brock felt a jolt of awareness at the contact. Stella's cheeks flushed slightly, suggesting she'd felt it too. "It's getting late," she said, gathering her papers. "I should turn in." "Stella," Brock said impulsively, "would you ride out with me tomorrow? There's a place I'd like to show you." Her eyes lit up. "I'd like that very much." The next day dawned clear and bright. Brock saddled 2 horses, his own sturdy bay gelding and a gentle mare for Stella, who was still somewhat new to riding. They rode east from the ranch, following the creek until it widened into a small, tree-lined lake. "This is my thinking spot," Brock explained as they dismounted. "When I first came to Arizona, I was angry at the world, lost my parents young, drifted from place to place, took risks I shouldn't have." He gazed out over the water. "Found this place by accident while tracking a wounded deer. Something about it calmed me. Made me think maybe I could stop running, build something lasting." Stella stood beside him, her shoulder nearly touching his. "It's peaceful," she agreed. "Like time stops here." "I've never brought anyone else here," Brock admitted quietly. She turned to look at him, her blue eyes searching his face. "Why me?" The question hung between them, laden with unspoken meanings. Brock took a deep breath, gathering his courage. "Because you've become important to me, Stella, more important than I expected. More important than anyone has been to me in a very long time." Her lips parted slightly, and Brock found his gaze drawn to them. Slowly, giving her time to pull away, he leaned forward and kissed her. Her lips were soft and warm beneath his, hesitant at first, then responding with surprising ardor. When they finally broke apart, Stella's cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright. "I've been hoping you would do that," she confessed. "For weeks now," Brock laughed, a weight lifting from his chest. "And I've been trying to convince myself that you saw me as nothing more than an employer." "Never just that," she said softly, reaching up to touch his face. "From the moment I opened my eyes and saw you, I felt safe. Even before I fully remembered who you were, I knew I could trust you." They spent the afternoon by the lake, talking about their pasts, their hopes, their growing feelings for each other. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Brock reluctantly suggested they head back to the ranch. "Alina will have dinner waiting," he said, helping Stella onto her horse. "And she's not one to tolerate tardiness." Stella laughed, the sound bright in the still air. "She reminds me of my grandmother, stern on the outside but with a heart of gold underneath." Their courtship unfolded gradually over the following months. Brock was careful to respect Stella's position as an employee and her relatively recent loss. They kept their changing relationship private at first, sharing secret glances across the dinner table and stolen kisses when they were alone. But as autumn painted the landscape in golds and reds, it became increasingly difficult to hide their feelings. Alina caught them embracing in the kitchen one morning and merely raised an eyebrow before discreetly withdrawing, a small smile playing at her lips. "I think we've been found out," Stella whispered, her arms still around Brock's neck. "Good," he replied, kissing her again. "I'm tired of pretending I'm not in love with you." The words had slipped out unplanned, but Brock didn't regret them. Stella's eyes widened, then softened with emotion. "I love you too," she said simply. "I think I have since that day by Cottonwood Creek when you saved my life." Their happiness was interrupted in late October when a band of rustlers hit Valentine Ranch, making off with 20 head of cattle. Brock organized a posse to track them, reluctantly leaving Stella behind despite her protests. "I need to know you're safe," he insisted, checking his rifle before mounting up. "These men are dangerous." "So is loving a man like you," she retorted, but her expression softened as she reached up to touch his face. "Just come back to me, Brock Valentine." The pursuit lasted 3 days, leading them deep into the mountains before they finally cornered the rustlers in a narrow canyon. The ensuing firefight was brief but intense. Brock took a bullet in his shoulder, but the rustlers were either captured or killed, and the stolen cattle recovered. When they rode back into Valentine Ranch, Stella ran from the house at the sound of hoofbeats. Seeing Brock's bandaged shoulder and pale face, she let out a small cry of distress. "It's just a scratch," he assured her as he dismounted carefully. "A scratch that bled enough to soak through 2 bandages," corrected his foreman, Tom Riley. "Get him to bed, Miss Atwood. Doc Wilson says he needs rest." For the next week, Stella barely left Brock's side, changing his bandages, bringing him food, and reading to him when restlessness made him irritable. Her gentle care touched something deep inside Brock, a place that had been wounded long before the bullet grazed his shoulder. As he recovered, Brock made a decision. On a crisp November morning, he asked Stella to ride with him to their special place by the lake. Despite concerns about his healing wound, she agreed. The lake was different in autumn, the surrounding trees aflame with color, the water darker and more mysterious. They stood on the shore, Brock's good arm around Stella's waist, watching an eagle soar above the water. "I've been thinking," Brock said after a comfortable silence, "about the future, about what I want." Stella turned in his embrace to face him. "And what do you want, Brock Valentine?" "You," he said simply. "By my side, not as an employee, but as my wife, my partner in everything." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small ring, a delicate gold band with a single pearl. "It was my mother's. I've carried it with me since she died, waiting for the right woman to give it to." Tears filled Stella's eyes as she looked at the ring, then back at Brock's face. "Are you certain? I don't want you to feel obligated because of what happened to me, because you saved my life." Brock silenced her with a gentle kiss. "The only thing I feel obligated to do is love you for the rest of my life. You didn't need saving, Stella. You're the strongest person I know. It's me who needed you to remind me what matters, to show me that building a ranch isn't enough if you have no one to share it with." A tear slipped down Stella's cheek as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Brock slipped the ring onto her finger, then lifted her off her feet in a joyful embrace, his wounded shoulder protesting but unable to dampen his happiness. They were married on Christmas Day, 1876, in the small church in Silverton. Elena Garcia wept openly as Stella walked down the aisle in a cream-colored dress that she and Mrs. Holloway had worked on secretly for weeks. Brock, standing at the altar in his best suit, thought his heart might burst with pride and love as she approached. The reception was held at Valentine Ranch, with neighbors and friends filling the house with laughter and good wishes. As evening fell and the guests began to depart, Brock found Stella standing on the porch, gazing out at the stars that spangled the clear winter sky. "Having second thoughts, Mrs. Valentine?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. She leaned back against him, fitting perfectly against his chest. "Not a single one. I was just thinking about how strange life is. If those bandits hadn't attacked our wagon, if you hadn't found me." "I would have found you somehow," Brock said with certainty. "Some things are meant to be." Stella turned in his arms, her face luminous in the silver moonlight. "I used to think fate was just a story people told themselves to make sense of random events. Now I'm not so sure." "What changed your mind?" "You," she said simply. "The way you found me when I needed you most, the way you knew my name before I spoke it." Brock's brow furrowed. "I didn't know your name until you told me days later." Stella smiled mysteriously. "When I first opened my eyes and saw you, I spoke your name. You looked so surprised." "Because I couldn't figure out how you knew who I was," Brock explained. "I didn't," Stella admitted. "Not consciously. I was barely aware of anything except your face above mine. But somehow my heart recognized you before my mind did." Brock pulled her closer, marveling at the woman in his arms and the twist of fate that had brought her to him. "Whatever force brought us together, I'm grateful for it." "As am I," Stella whispered, rising on tiptoe to kiss him as the first snowflakes of winter began to fall around them. Spring came early to Arizona in 1877, bringing with it lush growth in the pastures and a flurry of activity at Valentine Ranch. Under Stella's management, the business side of the operation had expanded significantly. They'd hired 2 more hands to help with the growing herd of cattle, and Brock's reputation for training excellent Mustangs had spread beyond the territory. As Stella's first anniversary at the ranch approached the anniversary of the day Brock had found her near death by Cottonwood Creek, they rode together to the lake that had become their special place. The water sparkled in the morning sunlight, and wildflowers dotted the surrounding meadow. "I have something to tell you," Stella said as they spread a blanket beneath a cottonwood tree. Her voice held a note of suppressed excitement that made Brock look at her curiously. "What is it?" In answer, Stella took his hand and placed it gently on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a baby. Joy surged through Brock, so intense it momentarily robbed him of speech. He gathered Stella into his arms, holding her carefully, reverently. "A baby," he repeated when he found his voice. "Our baby." "Due in November," Stella confirmed, her eyes shining with happiness. "Dr. Wilson confirmed it yesterday when you were out with the horses." Brock kissed her, pouring all his love and gratitude into the gesture. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "You have given me everything I never knew I wanted," he said softly. "A true partner, a home filled with love, and now a child." "We've given these things to each other," Stella corrected gently. "And to think it all began with the worst day of my life." "Sometimes the darkest moments lead us to the brightest futures," Brock reflected, his hand still resting protectively over their unborn child. "I found you left for dead, and you opened your eyes and spoke my name. In that moment, though I didn't realize it then, my life changed forever." "For the better," Stella teased, though she knew the answer. "For the infinitely better," Brock assured her, sealing the promise with another kiss as the sun climbed higher in the endless blue Arizona sky, casting its golden light over the life they were building together, a life born from tragedy, but transformed by love into something beautiful and enduring.